Hello everyone, it's Charlie in Westeros here, and before I get into my review, I just want you to meet my very own direwolf. Charlie, come here. Come here. Come here, puppy. Come here. Come here. Come on, stand up. Come on. Here we go. Her name is Charlie, and yes, she was named after me. She's actually a chocolate Labrador dog. So she's not quite as epic as a legit direwolf, but she's still a big, slobbery one of a kind. As you can tell, I'm not in my usual room. That's because I am back home in Quebec for the weekend, but I will be back in Toronto tomorrow. Anyway, I just have a few things to say. The first is that this episode was by far my favorite for the season. The ending just made me so happy, and I was worried that they wouldn't show the entirety of the events with Dany, but they did so I was satisfied. As always, I will be doing this review chronologically as the episode progresses, but if any of you think that I should do my reviews a bit differently, please do let me know. Also, if you enjoy my reviews, please do not hesitate to like this video and or hit the subscribe button. And I think that's all for now, so without further ado, I will get right into my review. So as the show opened with Jaime Lannister, I must say I was pretty shocked to have a scene with him so soon. The last episode basically ended with him losing his hand, which is, now dangling over his shoulder. In this episode, or in this scene rather, he is riding and he's in pain and he falls off his horse. And overall just further mistreated and tortured. They make him drink horse piss. And although he does try to fight somewhat against them, it really looks like he's lost the will to really resist fully. I have a few thoughts relating to Jaime this episode, but I'm going to return to them in the next scene that we see of him. So first, the scene following this one is the one with both Tyrion and Varys at King's Landing. Now before going into this scene, I really have to say that this episode was very much Varys' episode. I think for the first time we really learned so much about this character, his motivations, where he's from, and so on and so forth. I would actually even go so far to say that if it weren't for Dany's fiery ending, if you will, Varys would have been the best part of this episode. Anyway, in this scene, Tyrion wants to know if his sister tried to kill him at the Blackwater, and he wants help to prove it from Varys. Varys, meanwhile, responds by telling Tyrion about his past and how he became a eunuch, basically. It seems his parts were sacrificed to some kind of god when he was a slave as a young boy in one of those city-states across the sea from Westeros, and the city-state is named Myr. And it was part of some kind of magic ritual, and because of this, Varys claims he hates magic and all things magical related ever since. So, Harry Potter, you better hide. Pretty much Varys resolved at that point, after he got his, dink chopped off, to live in vengeance, and he gradually progressed from, living in the slums of Myr as a prostitute to being in the council chambers in King's Landing. Varys shows Tyrion, the sorcerer who castrated him in Myr, inside of a box that he has in his chambers, and this sorcerer is all chained up, and he looks like he's in pain. Basically, his point is that vengeance was his because he was tenacious, and it, quote, will be Tyrion's in time. He just needs influence, something that, of course, Varys says he will possess in time. And that's the lesson Varys is trying to communicate to Tyrion. So, meanwhile, at Craster's Keep, there is a lot of animosity building up between the Night's Watch, and it sounds like they're really starting to resent Craster for making them do chores like shoveling pig shit and underfeeding them, and overall it just seems like they don't trust him. It is also revealed that Gilly, I think her name is Gilly or Jilly? Gilly, she still has her son, and she is hiding him from Craster, but Sam knows, and he seems interested in wanting to help with her. Again, the real intense stuff at Craster's Keep occurs quite a bit later on in the episode, and I will be addressing a number of things about that when I get to that next scene very shortly. So, after that, we have a short scene with Bran and Jojen Reed. They're in a dream where Jojen tells Bran to go after the three-eyed crow. Bran climbs a tree, he finds him, but his mother's there, and she starts shaking him violently and asking him to, promise her not to climb trees anymore, just like in the first season of the first episode. And eventually he just falls down because she pushes him, and he wakes up from the dream right then and there. Now, what I am really curious about is why he dreamt of his mother. I've heard some people suggest maybe it's because he feels a sense of abandonment by his mother. Personally, I think this is going in the right direction, because Jojen says Bran's dreams are often real or reflect the future or past or even present events. I would probably guess that this dream is partially reflective of his mother's emotions at the current time, as we saw them in the last episode, where she really wishes she hadn't left him and is filled with so much regret. So maybe in a sense he is dreaming what his mother is presently feeling. Anyway, moving it along from there, we then have another scene with Varys, this time with his spy, the whore Ross, who has been spying on Littlefinger, of course. Varys asks her if Littlefinger has lost interest in Sansa Stark, and Ross responds by showing him the ship manifesto that he's going to be boarding to go to the Eyrie, and it shows that there's 2 feather beds in the cabin, which hints basically that he's going to take Sansa to the Eyrie when he goes there, of course, to convince Lysa Arryn to join Tywin Lannister's cause. Now, again, Lysa Arryn is Sansa's aunt on her mother's side, so it does make a lot of sense as to why Littlefinger is going to the Eyrie now. And with that in mind, it doesn't seem like his intentions are to benefit Tywin Lannister, surprisingly. So now I'm kind of wondering if he's going to now betray the Lannisters in spite of the fact that they gave him a title and he gave them, the Tyrells. Or maybe is he bringing Sansa to Lady Arryn as part of some bribe that Tywin is aware of? There are so many questions one should ask oneself regarding Littlefinger or Lord Baelish's motivations in this scene that I am very excited to see him eventually lay his cards out on the table, as they say, so we can, really understand his full motivation, because right now there's just a lot of unclarity as to what specifically motivates him. In the next scene, Joffrey is doing what he does best, aka gloating over the deaths and sufferings of previous Targaryen kings and princes. This, of course, only reaffirms my thoughts that Joffrey is just a sadist and a little creep. As he talks with Margaery, though, his mother Cersei and Margaery's grandmother, Lady Olenna, are talking, and Cersei seems more preoccupied with the way Margaery appears to be indulging Joffrey's interests. Finally, Margaery brings Joffrey to the doorway of the Sept of Baelor, where Joffrey was showing Margaery the tombs of the Targaryens, and she and he, go outside and begin to wave to the people of King's Landing, who seem to truly love Margaery, and even Joffrey, shockingly. Meanwhile, in my head, I'm kind of thinking if only they knew what he was really like. Anyway, the next scene is probably one of the saddest in the episode. Theon is walking through an underground passage with the young man who saved him, and basically reveals he made the, quote, wrong choice by betraying Robb, that he feels horrible for having killed the 2 orphan boys in the place of Rickon and Bran, and that, he just really wanted to make his father proud, but also reveals it's too late to make his father proud because his, quote, real father died at King's Landing. And of course, he is referring to Ned Stark. The young man says it might not be too late to make up for his, crimes, and he leads Theon into a dark room, but suddenly reveals he's an enemy and says he brought him back, and that Theon killed the other guards who were chasing him, and this young man orders Theon to be tied up. Now, I used to think this young man looked really sympathetic, but that grimace he made at the end of the scene was just really twisted. At this point, I do know who this character is, and there are a number of clues revealing his identity both in this episode and the last few ones as well, So as much as I would really like to really analyze this scene, I'm afraid that would be spoiling a number of things. Again, I apologize if I'm not really digging into a lot of the events so far, but as of now, I will be really, deconstructing the scenes and giving my full thoughts on them. Okay, so in the next scene, we get to see just how much Jaime seems to have given up because he lost his good hand, his sword hand. Brienne basically tells him to eat, live, and, take revenge and to stop whining because now he just knows how really hard the real world is. I find this episode interesting because we get a number of characters motivate others to get revenge, like both with Varys encouraging Tyrion and now with Brienne towards Jaime. We also fully realize that Jaime saved Brienne's life by lying about where she was from the last episode. Now this scene really creates a strong contrast between the Jaime of Season 1 and even Season 2, where, he didn't hesitate to push Bran Stark out of the window, or even when he killed one of his cousins, who was also one of Robb's prisoners, when he tried to escape in Season 2. Yet now, he goes out of his way to try and save Brienne, someone who isn't even a child and isn't related to him in any way, and loses his hand in the process. I really wonder what, specifically triggered him to become a more compassionate figure, considering at one time he really seemed to be a twin to Cersei in both blood and personality. But now that seems to really be changing, and I hope we get to find out why he's experiencing this change. So the next scene is one between Cersei and her father Tywin, but it really stands out in that it almost seemed like a variation of the same scene of the first episode of this season, which was between Tywin and Tyrion Lannister. Both that scene and this current one featured one of Tywin's children, more or less asking Tywin for his trust and permission to further his legacy. In this specific instance, Cersei is inquiring about Tywin's efforts to find Jaime and where he is. She stays seated basically after he reassures her, and wants to know why her father doesn't seem to have put trust in her like Jaime or apparently Tyrion, which I thought was kind of funny, and also pretty interesting because it shows that Tywin doesn't just have a disconnect with his son Tyrion, but also has one with his daughter Cersei as well. In the same way that Tyrion wants to play a part in Tywin's legacy, by having Casterly Rock, Cersei also wants a role in his legacy, even though she is a woman, and reveals her distrust for the Tyrells, and is worried that Margaery is possessing some kind of control over her son Joffrey. Tywin then basically dismisses her and says that he distrusts her not because she's a woman, but because, in fact, she is not as smart as she thinks she is, and pretty much questions her intelligence. Another note on the scene is that Tywin is observed stamping a letter with his seal, and I have a few thoughts on who he is sending that letter to. However, those are, again, spoilers, so for those of you who read the books, feel free to hypothesize away about who he's writing to. Oh, and before the scene ends, Cersei states, and I quote, "Perhaps you should try stopping him," i.e. Joffrey, "doing what he likes." And Tywin replies that he will. So I'm interested in seeing what he intends to do and if, indeed, they're both referring to Joffrey's apparent cruelty. Now, moving it along, we now have Lady Olenna telling some young girls, whom I think are actually other of her granddaughters, how she prefers other house mottos, like "Winter is coming," the Stark motto. Then Varys arrives, and we have this epic but hilarious interaction between Olenna and him. My favorite line after Olenna jokingly flirts with Varys was, and it's actually one of my favorite lines of the episode, I quote, "What happens when the non-existent bumps against the decrepit?" End quote. And I don't think I need to describe what she's referring to. Anyway, they get to the point of their conversation fairly fast, however. Varys wants to know why Olenna sought out Sansa a few days earlier, / a few episodes earlier. He goes on to reveal that a number of people are interested in Sansa, including Littlefinger, who he views as one of the most dangerous men in Westeros, and basically says he thinks Littlefinger, as well as many others, have an interest in Sansa because if Robb Stark perishes, she basically becomes the key to the North. That is to say, by marrying her, since her younger brothers and sister have all disappeared, her husband, or her potential husband, would pretty much gain control over a huge portion of the entire kingdom, and Varys suspects that Littlefinger wants to marry Sansa to increase his already growing possessions, since he has Harrenhal at this point, at least in name. Varys then reveals he has a solution to the problem, but Olenna says that the solution is obvious. And of course, what she is hinting at is revealed in the next scene between Margaery and Sansa. So Margaery goes to see Sansa and tells her a story about her family and basically, tries to seduce her into a friendship. She wants Sansa to be her friend, to come to Highgarden, and when Sansa expressed her worry that the Queen probably wouldn't like it so much, Margaery, is quick to correct her. She says, "The Queen Regent, you mean? I will be queen soon, and if you were to marry Loras, you would be at Highgarden." So this basically shows that Tyrells, have a very clear intention with Sansa, and they don't seem to be entirely honest with the Lannisters, because it shows that they have some of their own schemes with respect to Sansa and her potential inheritance. So in the next scene, the Night's Watch are still at Craster's Keep, and they are having a funeral for one of the dead men of the Night's Watch. And at this point, some of the men are starting to show some serious discontent and animosity towards Craster. Later on inside of Craster's Keep, it is revealed that he has a lot of excitement for them to leave. He talks about how he dislikes the Night's Watch, and finally, some men call him out for not sharing much of his food with them. Eventually, one of the men of the Night's Watch calls Craster a stingy bastard, which makes Craster react very badly. Now, just a side note, I don't think it is mentioned in the TV series per se, but the reason why Craster has such a bad reaction is because his mother was actually a wildling who was abandoned by Craster's father, who was a member of the Night's Watch, when she was impregnated by him. So anyway, aside from that side note, one of the men of the Night's Watch repeats the statement that Craster is a bastard, and all hell breaks loose. So Craster is killed, Jeor Mormont is stabbed, and he is eventually killed by Rast, the rapist, who is the same guy who taunts Sam, and has been taunting him for the past 3 or 2 seasons, really. Knights are fighting one another at this moment, and then Sam grabs Gilly and her baby and makes them run away with her far from that carnage. Now, as you can imagine, the episode title, which is "And Now His Watch is Ended," it's of course referring to Jorah Mormont's death. Given that the episode was named for him, I was really hoping that there would have been some emphasis, or I guess discussion, of Jorah Mormont, who is with Daenerys at this point, and address his relationship with his father Jor, who has just been killed, or I guess at least approached in some kind of way. If anything, it's kind of tragic because his father's just been killed, of course, and so far away from his son, which, like I say, really makes for a tragic end, since he has also been killed by his own men. Oh, and before I forget, I remember how Craster said that how he was a holy man and worships the, quote, right gods, aka, how he sacrificed his baby sons to the White Walkers. Yeah, let's think a little. What is going to happen now that now to his wives and whoever else is at his keep, now that he is gone and can't sacrifice any of his babies to his gods? It's just something to think about for the near future. That's all I'm going to say. Anyway, after this, we get to an Arya scene, as well as the Brotherhood without banners. Now they all reach their hidden base, and we finally get to meet their leader, a certain Beric Dondarrion, who is also supposedly in pretty rough shape as well. You know, he's lost an eye. They have a little joke about that in the show, which I don't really remember, but be that as it may, they also have Sandor Clegane with them, who they're accusing of murder. And it's also revealed that they intend to judge him both in the name of the poor and weak, in the name of the dead Ned Stark, who sent them on their mission to find the Sandor Clegane's older brother, as well as Robert Baratheon, but actually also in order to honor the Lord of Light. And yes, they apparently are now worshipping the same god that Melisandre is worshipping, Stannis' witch lady. So we can only imagine if maybe they also know some of her crazy magic. Even though Sandor denies being a murderer, Arya bravely calls him out and says that he killed Micah, the young boy that she was playing stick fighting with in the first season when Joffrey interfered and her direwolf Nymeria attacked him. So Sandor is basically sentenced to a trial by combat because they can't entirely prove his guilt. And it is decided that he's going to fight Beric, their leader. There is so much I would really like to say about Beric Dondarrion, but that again would be spoilers, and I really, really want to talk about the next scene, but also the next scene is undeniably the best scene for this entire season so far, and that is, of course, with Daenerys and the slave traders, or the slaver Krasnus, so without further ado, let's get into that. Now, I'm really excited to talk about this. So, after getting a bit of last-minute advice from Krasnus about the Unsullied, Daenerys and Krasnus go through with the exchange of her dragons for the Unsullied soldiers. So she hands him Drogon, her biggest dragon, who is attached to a rope, and he gives her the Harpy Whip, which symbolizes her command over the Unsullied. And once she gets confirmation that the transaction, has been approved, she does something really epic. So for the epic part, she addresses her army in Valyrian, which is the same language, more or less, that Krasnus is speaking. Missandei, the translator, is shocked, but Krasnus still doesn't notice. Then, Krasnus is all like, the dragons won't listen, like, what the hell? And she answers in Valyrian, and quote, "A dragon is not a slave." And then she commands her army to attack the slavers, their men, but not to harm any children or any of the other slaves, and to free these slaves. And then she says, Dracarys, which is the order for Drogon to burn Krasnus and all the slavers of Astapor, and smoke starts rising, and it's freaking epic. So, after the massacre, she then frees the slaves, and as well as the Unsullied, of course, and she tells them that they're allowed to leave as free men, but if they wish to do so, or if they wish it, they can fight for her and join her cause. The Unsullied then began to stomp the butts of their spears as a sign that they choose to stay with her and fight for her cause, and then they start to march off. Now, as you can imagine, this scene is significant in just so many ways. This is like a huge turning point in the series. First, the fact that Daenerys frees the Unsullied means that she has both listened to Mormont and Barristan Selmy in their advice in the previous episodes. She follows Mormont's by actually purchasing the well-trained Unsullied, but she equally pays homage to Selmy by freeing them and letting them choose their path, which thereby makes her earn their loyalty and dedication in the same way that Selmy told her that Rhaegar earned or had his troops' trust and loyalty. So overall, the whole scene was done perfectly, and as a book reader, I really felt that they truly did the book justice at this scene. Even though I knew it was coming, I just loved it. It was just perfect. No other words can describe it. And now that Dany, of course, has an army, we need to consider what her next move is. Will she maybe go directly to Westeros to stake her claim on the Iron Throne? Or will she perhaps test her army's capability, just like Krasnus suggested she do, to some of the other nearby cities in the region. These are, of course, some very important things to think about because, at the very least, now Dany poses an actual military threat to Westeros because she possesses a huge army, and of course, events like the ones that just occurred, along with the fact that she has dragons with her, will certainly not go unnoticed in the West. I could really go on and on about the scene and Dany, but I think I have said the necessary, so I will move on to my concluding thoughts. So, in concluding this review, overall, I gotta say that I was very, very pleased with this episode. It was probably my favorite in this season so far. Even though we got to learn a lot about Varys, and I would even argue that this was his episode, if it weren't for the fact that Dany really outshone him in the last 10 minutes of the episode. At first, I was worried we wouldn't get to see the entirety of the events, so I'm glad they showed everything that took place at Astapor, and they didn't just leave it, for a to be continued spoiler or whatever. Next episode, I'm hoping we get to see what Daenerys' next move is. And also, I hope we get to see some Robb, as well as Sir Davos and Stannis, who were, missing from this episode, and I'm curious to know what they're up to now. So yeah, anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for viewing. If you made it to the end, leave me your thoughts, suggestions. And again, if you enjoyed my review, please do not hesitate to subscribe and like this video. So that's all for now, and take care, guys.